So hi everybody. I hope everyone printed out or has the ingredients and recipe in front of them. And as always, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the chat and I'll try to check in on that as much as I can. So this recipe can be cut in half. It just depends on how many cookies you want. I'm gonna make a full batch and split it in half and show you two different things we can kind of do with them. All right, so for any basic cookie recipe, you wanna start off with room temperature butter. And you can do this either salted or unsalted butter, okay? Whatever you kind of have on hand. I'm gonna open up my butter here, and it's gonna take 2 sticks, which is 1 cup of butter. So I'm gonna take my butter and put it right in my mixing bowl here. And I've said this once, I'll say it again, we wanna cream the butter and our sugars together. So any recipe, even if it doesn't tell you to cream together your sugars and butters, if there are butter and sugar in the ingredients list, you always wanna put that in first, all right? So you're gonna put that in first always. So let's just kind of cut up this butter and put it in our mixing bowl. If your butter is not room temperature, you can cut it up, put it into a microwave safe bowl, and just microwave it for like 30 seconds, okay? It should be all it needs. What you're looking for is if you can touch the butter and get like a little bit of a fingerprint in that butter, then it's good to go, okay? You don't want it soupy. I'm now gonna take my sugars. Now for this particular recipe, we're doing 3/4 brown sugar and 3/4 white sugar. In the recipe, there are notes in there for if you don't have brown sugar, because I know that's not as common of an ingredient in our pantries. You can do a bunch of different substitutions. Molasses or honey and white sugar can substitute. So let's add in 3/4 white sugar. And I have my brown sugar. I'm using light brown sugar because that's what I have. If you have dark brown, use that. So now we need to cream these ingredients together before we add anything else. All right, so I'm gonna put this under my mixer. If you do not have an electric mixer or a handheld mixer to do this, you can use just your hand and get elbow grease, okay? Get a little bit of an arm workout and try to get that butter and sugar incorporated as much as you can. So there is a question if you are having this recipe. So what I do for the sugars typically is I'll do 1/4 cup. And then if I don't have an 1/8 cup measuring tool, I'll just kind of eyeball it. So it'll be 1/4 cup and then like 1/2 of 1/4 cup to have those sugars. And I just eye it. The worst that'll happen is you'll have a slightly sweeter cookie. So, which I don't think is the end of the world. Let's show you what this looks like. All right, so can everyone see that? You can't tell where the sugars start and the butter ends. All right, before I go and add other ingredients, I'm gonna take my spatula and scrape down the sides, right? And make sure to scrape down the bottom, see if there's any large chunks that I didn't see before of either butter or sugar. Okay, here we go. All right, so next step, we're gonna add our eggs. And for this, we want 2 whole eggs, right? So if you're having that, real easy, 1 egg, okay? So the whole egg right in there, 1 and 2. And you'll notice we're doing our wet ingredients first. This is to get those ingredients all incorporated before adding our dry. Let's put this back under. Shouldn't take long to add those eggs in there. All right, so now I'm gonna add in my flavoring. I'm using vanilla. If you have almond extract, we talked about last week, I think it was last week for Earth Day cookies, some other flavorings you can add into your cookies. So if you don't have an extract, but you have maybe some citrus fruits on hand, you can take some orange juice and some orange zest, that's the outside, the rind of the orange, and put that into your cookie dough at this point. Some lemon maybe could work well to add in those other flavors. Okay, so you can give that a try too. All right, so we're doing, what are we doing here? 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Okay, so if you're having it, 1/2 teaspoon. All right, so I have 1/2 teaspoon measurer here, so I'm gonna do 2 of these. 1, 2. Beautiful. All right, so let's start adding in some of our dry ingredients. For this, we're going to be using baking soda as our leavener ingredient. We're also going to be adding in salt and then flour. If you used a salted butter, you don't need to necessarily add in as much salt as the recipe states. So the recipe is for a teaspoon of salt. All right, if you have salted butter, maybe try cutting that down in half. All right, so that would be a half a teaspoon salt if you're doing the full recipe, or a quarter if you're halving it. Okay, and that's just if you're using salted butter. I'm using unsalted, so I am going to use the full teaspoon of salt. You can use baking powder instead. All right, both act a little bit differently. So again, the texture might be a little different, but it'll still raise up your cookie. If you do not have either of those ingredients, a slightly more complex thing that you can do to help give your cookie that lift so it's not flat as a pancake is take heavy whipping cream, put it in the bowl of a stand mixer or handheld mixer, and whip it up until it has stiff peaks. Okay, and that means that when I take my mixer, my whisk away from it, it kind of gets this like peak on top that doesn't just sink back down. And once I have it at that point, I can carefully fold it into my cookie batter. Okay, and what that's doing is it's that air that you've whipped into that heavy cream is gonna then get into my cookie batter. But I have to be careful about how I fold it because I don't want it to deflate. You can also do it with egg whites, right? So you could separate your eggs, your egg yolks from egg whites, put the yolks in here, whip up the egg whites until it's stiff peaks, and then fold it in. Again, those are a little bit more complex, but that is something that you can do. The question was, can you use baking soda that's been sitting in your fridge to help freshen up your fridge? You can, but yes, it does tend to absorb the smells in your fridge. So you might end up with an interesting tasting cookie. So baking soda is what I used, but you can use baking powder. All right. So in here, I have my 1 teaspoon salt and I have my 1 teaspoon of baking soda. I'm gonna add that right in and I'm gonna sprinkle it in. And then I'm just gonna take my spatula and incorporate those dry ingredients into my mix before adding in my flour. We're gonna be using 2 1/4 cups of flour. Now, I don't want to add this in all at once because then it's going to have a really hard time mixing everything in, whether I'm doing it by my machine, a handheld mixer, or by hand. So I want to add this in little by little until it's incorporated. So I'm just going to put in maybe 1/3 of this and then put it back under my machine to get that mixed in before adding in more of my flour. I'm going to add some more of my flour in here. All right, so remember, I'm not adding all of it. I'm leaving some in the bowl for one more addition. Okay, I'm going to add one more. There we go. Ooh, this keeps falling down. All right, so that's done. One more mix here, and then we get to have some fun. Not that this wasn't already fun. Now at this point, if you haven't already, this would be a great time to preheat your oven. You want to preheat it to 375. Okay, so if you had looked at or printed the recipe out, you might have already done that, which is fine too. 375 is what we're looking for on that oven temperature. So it was asked in the chat, when we place these cookies in the oven, do we place them in the middle of the oven or somewhere else? The middle of the oven, the middle rack, is always preferred because that's going to be the sort of most even heat. But I frequently have had it where I can't do that because my pan is too big or I'm putting too much in my oven. So if you have it where, like, let's say there's 1 or 2 pans on one rack and another on the bottom, make sure to rotate halfway through. Okay, so those ones that are on the top, bring them to the bottom. The one on the bottom, bring it to the top, just to even out those the temperatures that are hitting those pans. Okay, and that's why you see a lot of time in baking shows they'll use convection instead of regular oven, because that then circulates the heat a little bit more. But even if you were using a convection oven, still good to rotate your pans. And before I go on to my next step, I want to take my spatula and really make sure that I've gotten all the flour, because it looks like I have, and I'll show you what it looks like in here. But the mixer can't necessarily catch the bits of flour all the way on the bottom. So it's really, really important to make sure you scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl to catch any flour that the mixer or your handheld mixer might have mixed. All right, so we're just gonna scrape that up, and it looks like it did a pretty good job. Now I'm gonna make two kinds of customized cookies for you. I'm gonna do one with various mix-ins, okay, and I'm gonna do another that's stuffed. So if you are doing stuffed cookies, and I think I said this in the notes of the recipe, but what you're gonna wanna do right now is take a tray or just some sort of sheet with a piece of parchment or wax paper or maybe a sprayed piece of aluminum foil, and whatever you want in the center of your cookie, it could be Nutella, peanut butter. I have some peanut butter and some globs of leftover frosting that I had. You're just gonna kind of scoop it out into about half tablespoons. You don't want them to be too big, and put them onto the sheet and stick it in the freezer for just a couple of minutes so it hardens just a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna do my mix-in cookie first, and then I'll do the stuffed cookies. This way, those of you that wanna do that, you have time to pop it in the fridge. All right, I think for both of my cookies though, I'm gonna put in chocolate chips because that's just standard. So for your mix-ins, I used to go down the candy aisle of the grocery store and literally just pick whatever kind of candy looked interesting to me that day and dumped it into my cookie bowl, right? Really the trick is just adding not so much that your dough can't handle it. I never really measure this, how much, you know, chocolate chips or mix-ins go into it. I just kind of wing it. Right, so for this, I am using the standard semi-sweet chocolate chips. Milk chocolate works, dark chocolate works, white chocolate works. If you have chocolate bars, you can chop that up and stick that in, okay? So I'm just gonna add like half of the bag. And then I'm going to use my spatula to mix it up. I don't want to over mix at this point. Okay, so I'm just going to mix this up until I got a nice mix in of my chocolate chips. So I'm going to take about half of this or so, put it in a different bowl so I can do like my mix-in variety, and then I'm going to have enough for my stuffed cookies. Okay, so there we go. This is only because I'm showing you both versions, okay? So if you're only doing the mix-ins, only doing the stuffed cookies, you don't have to separate out your batter. Now, I looked through my cabinet and I found some leftover Reese's peanut butters. Can you do Nerds? I don't see why not. I mean, so the candies that you're putting in, you just want to imagine biting into it. Okay, so Nerds could add a really cool pop of color and an interesting texture. I never baked with Nerds, so I don't know when you bake them what happens to them, if they soften up at all. Give it a try. That's the best response I can give for any candy, okay? Give it a try. I wouldn't use something like a lollipop, for instance, like a crushed lollipop. That won't really melt in the temperatures that we're doing and for the length of time, so that would probably hurt your tooth. But yeah, Nerds are small enough, give it a try. So I have Reese's peanut butter cups. I have Quaker Oats that I could put in there. I think I'm gonna do some peanut butter though. Let's open this bag. So yeah, this is great if you have leftover Easter candy lying around that you don't know what to do with, or Halloween candy. You know, this stuff doesn't really go bad. The hardest part is unwrapping all of them. My greatest discovery was that all the candy companies now sell candies that are like unwrapped in a bag. All right, so I'm just gonna rip it up, tear it up. This absolutely does not need to be exact. And as I said, I'm not exactly measuring these. This isn't gonna affect the chemical makeup of the cookie. You can do it by eye, and if you feel like you want more candy in there, then you put more candy in there. Once I have a couple of pieces, I'm just going to use my hands to kind of mix it up and see, do I want more? Is it good? Or, you know, what do I think? All right. I think that's a little better. All right, so I'm noticing in my dough, not only do I have the mini chocolate chips and I have the chunks of milk chocolate from the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, but all throughout I have this peanut butter, and that should be really, really, really good. All right. Normally, what I would do at this point is pop this dough in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes or the freezer for 10. I always like doing that because I feel like my cookie then just pops up a little bit more because the butter is cold. So the butter isn't gonna spread. But because we're already at 3 o'clock, I'm gonna go ahead and just pop this onto my cookie sheet and put it in the oven or get ready to. I have my baking sheet that I have it lined with a slip mat. You can put parchment paper on here, all right? And now it's kind of up to you how big you want your cookies to be. Usually good rule of thumb is about a mounded tablespoon. So if you were to take a tablespoon and scoop it up, all right, it's gonna have that mound on top. That could be what we're looking for here. And I always like rolling it up and placing it on the baking sheet. All right, so you should be able to see that. And you just want them to be all around the same size, so this way they bake for the same amount of time. And about 2 inches apart, so they don't spread into each other and become one giant cookie. I'm just rolling these up. How's everyone doing? Can you use it? You can absolutely use an ice cream scooper. Just beware that then you're gonna have giant cookies, which is totally not a bad thing, but you're gonna need to cook them for longer than I'm gonna cook mine, okay? So the question was, if I use an ice cream scoop, how much longer will it be? So these cookies are gonna cook for 10 to 12 minutes at 375 in the oven. So what I would do is start out at 12 minutes, check your cookie and go from there. And then I usually add 2 minutes on at a time until they're done, okay? I can't tell you exactly how much longer they'll be. It might take 15 or 16 minutes instead of 10 to 12. Since I need to make my stuffed cookies before I put these in the oven, I'm gonna pop these in the refrigerator just until I'm ready to put the stuffed cookies in the oven, so they'll go in at the same time. So give me 1 second and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have the rest of my cookie dough here. Okay, so it only has the chocolate chips in it, that's it. And then I have if they were frozen, they've melted since being out, peanut butter and frosting. So what I'm gonna do here is take a chunk of cookie dough, a little bit bigger than the ones that I did before. I'm gonna roll it up and flatten it out, okay, just like that. And then I'm gonna take the lump of whatever it was I froze, so in this case, this is some frosting. I'm gonna put it in the center of my cookie and wrap the dough around the cookie, kind of like I'm making a dumpling. And then take a little bit more dough, roll it up, flatten it out, place it on top. And the goal is that you don't want to see whatever it was that you put inside, okay? That's the goal here. So now I have this giant cookie ball, right? It's quite big. So this is gonna have a longer baking time, okay? But it's really big, but I can't see what's on the inside. Oh, another thing you can mix into cookies, pretzels. That'd be really good, a little salty and sweet. All right, I think now I'm gonna do this one with some peanut butter. So I'm gonna take some peanut butter, I'm gonna put that in the middle, and then I'm gonna take some jelly. Open up my jelly here. There we go. And take a little bit of jelly, put it on top of my cookie. Oh my gosh, this will be so good. All right, fold the cookie dough around it. Take a little bit more and place it on top. Okay, and now if I'm using something a little more liquid like the jelly, because I didn't have a chance I didn't freeze that, you just want to take extra care when you're covering it with the dough, because it might spill out. Okay. So I'm just gonna seal it all up. All right, look for any seams, okay, and put it down. Now these I'm only gonna put 2 in a row, okay? So the other tray I had 3, but because these are so big, I'm gonna only put 2, okay? So this way I can keep them spaced apart. Okay, let's do another one. So I have one cookie I wanted to show you. I don't even know if I could pick it up. I put too much stuffing in it and it was sticking to my fingers. So I know for a fact, I don't know if you, oh, you can totally see it. See all that red? Okay, so that's jelly that's just gonna come right on out, and that's okay. I'm just gonna let it be. I don't feel like trying to fix it. And I just grabbed my other cookie dough out of the fridge. You can really see the size difference between these. And I'm gonna grab one more Reese's peanut butter cup here. And just do a little placement on top of these cookies. I'm gonna go pop these in the oven, come back and answer any questions. These are only gonna take about 12 minutes, these guys. These are gonna take a little bit longer, okay? When they're completely done, you do wanna wait for them to cool. Cookies that come out of the oven, they're still gonna feel almost a little underbaked, and they can be hard to pick up, okay? And they're hot. So try to let them cool. The other thing I've learned over the years is it is important for them to cool separately. So I used to always take my cookies directly out of the oven and pile them up in a Tupperware container or in a Ziploc bag or on a plate. And what happens then is when they do cool, they cool and kind of congeal together in one giant cookie. And so for people to get at it, they need to like rip off the cookies.
Casey, I have a question.
Yes.
I just had a thought about adding like instant coffee or something. Can you do that?
Do it. So instant coffee, you can absolutely add, if you wanted to add coffee, what's it called, like freshly ground coffee, then you would need to like kind of brew it first and add it in. But instant coffee totally works. And little secret, if you ever make a chocolate cake, adding a little bit of instant coffee or espresso, not a lot, just a little bit, helps pump up that chocolate flavor. You won't taste the coffee. It's not going to add like this caffeine boost to it, but it helps bump the chocolate flavor up. And
Thank you.
if you wanted to make these cookies chocolate, all right, I took out my cocoa powder and I totally forgot about it. So anytime you want to add chocolate cocoa powder, turn something into chocolate version, you want to sub out that amount, some flour for your cocoa powder. So in this case, we're using 2 1/4 cups. I would probably do maybe like, instead of I'd probably measure out my 2 1/4 cups, scoop out a 1/2 cup of that flour, put it back in the bin, and do a 1/2 cup of cocoa powder in there. Okay, you might end up needing to add a little bit more sugar to offset the bitterness of the chocolate, but then hey, chocolate cookies. So if they're just kind of, so what you're looking for to know that your cookies are done, okay? You want the edges of the cookie to look a little brown, and you don't want the top to look shiny, okay? Yeah. So if the top is shiny and it looks wet, that means it's not done yet, okay? So that means to leave it in for another couple of minutes. If the bottoms of them have like a brown that's kind of like creeping up a little bit, that's also actually a good sign, as long as it's not turning, you know, burnt and charcoal, then you're fine. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. Now, some people like an underbaked cookie. Okay, so if that's the case, then, you know, if it's still wet on top, I would still leave it in for another 2 minutes, but then you can probably take it out. And some people like a crispier cookie, in which case you would want the whole entire cookie to look golden brown. Okay, that's up to you and your preferences. All right, so if you want something a little underbaked, or not underbaked, but just soft, a soft cookie, then you just don't want it to be shiny on top. As soon as it's not shiny and there's a little bit of brown coming on the edges, take it out in the oven, let it cool. If you like a crunchier cookie, wait for the whole cookie to look beautiful golden brown. So if your cookies do end up touching together in the oven, before they're finished cooking, you can kind of pull them out and take a spatula and just kind of define those lines a little bit. So kind of slice in between the cookies, or just wait till they're completely done cooking, take them out of as soon as they come out of the oven, they'll still be a little bit soft. They harden a little bit more as they cool, which makes them easier to pick up, right? So as soon as you take them out of the oven, then you can use a spatula to just, or like a butter knife kind of thing to just slice them up and make them so they're separate cookies. Well, I hope you all will share your photos of your finished cookies with us. Let us know what you stuffed them with. I'm curious to know. You can email me, Casey_Hallen@ridecountryday.org. If you post on Instagram or social media, make sure to tag me at Casey H Bakes and Ride Country Day. So this way we can see your amazing bakes from today. And I hope you'll join us next week when we'll be making Pop-Tarts. As always, if you have any questions that come up after, feel free to email me. And I hope you guys had a great time making your stuffed and customized cookies today.